Okay, before I start, I want to apologise if you hear any rain. It is currently torrential out there, so if you can hear any rain, I am so sorry. But anyway, welcome to part 1 of the DisneyVerse timeline in chronological order. This is a different series to what we usually do, so I'm excited to start it. This series is based on my DisneyVerse timeline, which you can find linked in the description and over on our website, also in our description. It features all 60 official Disney animated classics and their related shorts and series in chronological order of in-universe timeline. This entry will focus on the timeline from prehistory down to 200 BCE. I created this timeline to help me come up with a future series where we connect every Disney animated classic together. Some films are composed in multiple segments, which will be broken up into different entities to make things easier, as some segments may not take place at the same point in time as others. This timeline is based on fictional properties and is by no means supposed to be taken seriously. It's just a bit of fun. The ways we find out the time period for each entity will differ depending on the context of the subject. Some properties will be studied based on real-world historical cues, whereas others will be based on when the source material is set or was published. If you think any of the placements in this timeline are wrong, feel free to comment and the timeline can always be amended. This entry contains spoilers for all segments for Fantasia, The Lion King, Hercules, Fantasia 2000, Dinosaur, Brother Bear, Moana, and Raya and the Last Dragon. A big thank you to Kieran, my close friend, who created the images you see in this video. You can also support him over his Instagram, linked in the description. With that said, let's get right into the timeline. Prehistory, Fantasia Rite of Spring, and Dinosaur. We kick off our timeline with the film Dinosaur and the Fantasia segment Rite of Spring. The events of these stories take place before recorded time and are surprisingly close together timeline-wise. Dinosaur focuses on the events leading up to the end of the reign of dinosaurs as the dominant species on Earth, and Rite of Spring also showcases the meteor shower seen at the beginning of Dinosaur, implying these two events are happening somewhat simultaneously. It's worth mentioning that the DisneyVerse is a fictional universe, and therefore any dinosaurs showcased that may not actually have been alive during this time period don't upset our timeline. It just means in the DisneyVerse these dinosaurs were roaming the Earth at this time. 1800 BCE, Fantasia 2000, Pomp and Circumstance. The next entry on our timeline is the Fantasia 2000 segment Pomp and Circumstance. This segment follows Donald and Daisy Duck, the first and so far only Disney classic to feature Daisy in a prominent role, as they recreate the events of the biblical story Noah's Ark. This segment is based off the biblical story of Noah's Ark. Placing the story on a timeline isn't easy, but it is believed to be based off the Babylonian flood, which has been referenced as far back as the 19th century BCE. So we shall set this segment in the beginning of the 18th century BCE, giving it at least 100 years for the story to be well known enough to be documented. This segment raises an interesting question about how Mickey and his friends work within the connected timeline. It's a topic we will explore deeper in the future, but for now we will be taking the information we've received and assume this particular segment is set in the past. The fact that implies Donald and Daisy are somewhat immortal just makes it even better. 1590 BCE, Fantasia 2000, the Firebird Suite. Now we jump forward around 3 centuries to the Fantasia 2000 segment, the Firebird Suite. This segment follows a nature sprite as she comes face to face with a phoenix bird at the time of its death. Based on the look of the Firebird burning everything in sight, it draws similarities to the Minoan volcanic eruption that is believed to have taken place between the years 1642 to 1540 BCE. The landscape also appears similar with its lush green land, so I will be setting this event in the year 1590 BCE as a nice middle ground between this time period. Segments like this don't really give us much to go off when it comes to timeline placement, so this is where we need to start being creative. To find this date, I researched tirelessly, trying to find some real-life location of volcanic event that matched up with the setting of this segment. The Minoan volcanic eruption in question seemed to be the closest match, at least in my opinion. 1277 BCE, Fantasia, the Pastoral Symphony. Jumping forward another couple of centuries, we have the Fantasia segment Pastoral Symphony. This segment is set on and around Olympus and features a mixture of Grecian and Roman gods, showing that they interacted in the distant past or perhaps were interchangeable. This segment has to take place before the birth of Hercules, as Zeus is shown without his wife and looks younger in general. If it can be assumed this segment is at least 100 years before Hercules' birth, it would be set in the year 1277 BCE. 78 BCE, The Lion King. The Lion King comes next on our timeline. With the absence of any present humans, it's difficult to definitively place this film on the timeline. However, due to Scar's skin being seen in Hercules, it's safe to assume it takes place at least 1 year before Hercules in 1778 BCE. For some of these entries, such as The Lion King, we need to resort to Easter eggs for a more definitive placement on this timeline. Hercules' lion pelt is unmistakably Scar, and therefore we must assume the events of The Lion King takes place before he received it. This also works well thematically, as The Lion King draws inspiration from many biblical tales, which are set in the distant past. 1177 BCE, Hercules. Of course, Hercules comes next on our timeline. It's quite a pivotal moment in our timeline as it helps anchor the events of two previous entries. So how did we decide on its placement in 1177 BCE? Well, we resorted to the Disney Wiki, where Hercules is mentioned to be set at least 3,000 years before The Little Mermaid, making it set in 1177 BCE. So this is the year we will roll with. How do we know when The Little Mermaid is set? Well, you'll just have to keep watching the series to find out. But for now, I'll leave you with the information that is anchored by another princess movie. Look, some stretching comes with the job. It's all a bit of chaotic fun, so let's just roll with it for now. 984 BCE, Moana. Speaking of princess films, the first of two in this entry of our timeline series is Moana. The film is actually relatively easy to place, as the creators of the film have candidly mentioned in the past that the film takes place 3,000 years ago in Polynesia. If this is to believe, then 3,000 years before the year of the film's release in 2016 would be around the year 984 BCE. So that is where we will place it. 690 BCE, Brother Bear. Coming up to the last leg of the century, we have the penultimate entry on this list, Brother Bear. For this film, we had to take some real-world cues to find its placement. The film is set in post-Ice Age Alaska. Inuit tribes began populating North America around 1000 BCE, so we will place this film roughly 10 generations after that year, in about 690 BCE, to give time for these tribes to fully settle on their land. 200 BCE, Raya and the Last Dragon. Finally, we have our second princess film, and the most recently released in this entry, Raya and the Last Dragon. For this, we also need to look at real-world cues. Despite taking place in the fictional land of Kamandra, the setting is confirmed to be heavily based on Southeast Asian cultures. Since Kamandra has only just reformed in the events of the film, it's likely this film takes place at least 100 years before Southeast Asian countries began trading with other Asian regions, as they need to put themselves and their home first, setting this film in 200 BCE at the very latest. So that was it for the first entry in this DisneyVerse timeline series. This was very chaotic to create, but also a lot of fun, so I hope you enjoyed it. If you think any of these entries are wrongly placed, feel free to let me know in the comments and I will reevaluate their placement. Do ensure to check out the timeline I created on TimeToast, linked in the description below, for more context. The next entry in the series will span the time period of the 2nd to 15th centuries. Until then, I wish you Boreda, Brunhanda, Noswaita, or Nosda, wherever you are in this great universe. Bye!